is the Open Podcast, where your host, Sander Mangel, and his guests share strategies and insights to help digital agencies thrive in a changing world.
I'm Sander Mangel. I'm a solutions architect. I work at my own company, ecommerce. We're a small boutique consulting agency. So I think I do have some insights on the tough times we're talking about today. With me is Katie.
Nice to be here. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Katie Wilson, Partnerships Manager and Enablement Specialist, working with partners for a number of years now. So kind of seeing challenges both from working with them via platform side, but also directly agency side. So great to be here today.
Fantastic. And we have another special guest from far away across the ocean. And how are you doing?
What do you mean far away? I'm right here. Howdy. Hey, thanks for having me on too, Sander and Katie. It's a good group here. Really, actually, I don't know if excited to talk about this topic is the right word. You know, tough times is a legit title for a conversation, but I think it's important to dig into.
Fantastic. Well, before we get started, I do want to give a big shout out to Pushly, our sponsor for this episode. What does Pushly do? Well, Pushly recognizes that shopper merchants often face the same problem, and that is that customers buy once and then never come back. Pushly changes that. They turn one-time buyers into loyal app users. And the best part, you don't need to even be technical. So even I can do it. Now you might be thinking, why would I need an app? Is that cool? Yes, it is cool. Even if you have a great responsive mobile template, your app actually helps people to buy more than once on your shop. You can send push notifications directly to your customer's phone. You can also send automatic push notifications to remind somebody that they forgot something in the cart, for example, and a lot of other scenarios, right? And push notifications are just so much more present on the phone than email. You can add your logo. It stays visible on their smartphone every single day on the homepage and in the menu. And as a case, they have, for example, Polonia Market, the go-to place for Polish food in Germany. Who doesn't like Polish food? Sausages, great soups, what have you. They have recently implemented that. We're talking about a relatively small merchant, right? But they already have 10,000 downloads on Google Play. And of course, they also have an iPhone app. And this is not a big brand, right? So 10,000 is huge. If you're interested in that, you can contact Pushly through their website. They have a book a call meeting, and they'll get right back to you. So huge shout out to Pushly. We really appreciate that they're sponsoring our webinar. Then let's continue. Today we're tackling a reality that many agencies here, raise your hand, are facing right now. The market has shifted. And that worked in business development. What worked in business development before doesn't work anymore, right? We have to get innovative.
And we're seeing that across both the European market, obviously where we are, and across the North American market. There definitely feels to be a lot fewer inbound leads. Sales cycles are getting longer. Also real tougher negotiations on price and clients really challenging the detail.
Yeah. I've seen quite a bit of that too. When things get tighter, the spotlight gets shown, and on every little conversation, nook, cranny, and crevice. And so the burden of proof of ROI, of value, of return, of every penny spent is increasing, which is not a bad thing, but it definitely changes the game up from folks that are used to just kind of like going through and being able to move forward productively. Much more time is being spent on kind of showing results, on forecasting results, on tracking on those, and really making, pixel perfect sure that, we're able to kind of show why something is working or why it's not, and justify it ahead of time, which sometimes, none of us have a crystal ball. Well, at least I don't. Maybe you two are pretty talented folks, so. But it does present some challenges, as I'm sure many other folks that are in a similar position can acknowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why today's conversation is so important and timely. I think today let's try to break it down in two major areas. First, I want to talk about how to adapt your new business strategy for today's market. Right, as an agency, where do you find your leads? And then second, how to get more value from existing clients. Because especially for me at Open Commerce, I found that the easiest client to sell to is the one you already have. So let's start with the challenges that agencies are facing on the new business front. Noah, from your perspective at Above the Fray, what major shifts have you seen in the sales landscape over the past year or two?
None whatsoever. It's been basically the same as it ever has been. Yeah, no.
Peachy.
Sometimes some gallows humor helps in these times, but yeah, I mean, I think and really this has been about a half decade, really since the pandemic. There was some unprecedented times. Things started shifting and changing. And I think the sort of, I don't want to go as far as the rug being pulled out from underneath our feet, but the sand's definitely shifting beneath our feet. And especially over the last year with a lot of the sort of global economic uncertainty that's going on and sort of moving targets that we all have to try to adjust to currently. And also just some of the sort of like the long tail kind of whiplash from what happened in 2020, 2021, is finally starting to really come back around. So, back to what we were talking about earlier, a lot of the folks that we talked to, that are coming in new that we haven't spoken to before have sort of this idea in their head that's been pushed by some platforms and some things like Amazon and things like that. Like there's an easy button, there's a quick, easy way to do everything that, which isn't a terrible thing. I think, as an agency owner, we should always be kept on our toes to find more efficient, more effective ways of doing things, but it needs to be realistic. And sometimes when you have these unrealistic expectations walking in, we're left to kind of figure out where is the common ground? How do we educate? At the same time, we're trying to keep our business afloat because we can't just simply be educating for free. The game is to be sold, not to be told, right? So like, we can't keep the roof over our head and continue to do that education if we don't have new business coming in. So I think, that's the sort of the longer tail on that education piece has been something that we've been trying to grapple with as an agency. Spending the time to, have folks go out there. And sometimes that means they might come back a year or two later because they have to go out there into the rest of the world and say, oh, whatever, Above the Fray was telling us in this sort of pre-sales conversation, we don't necessarily know that's real. So we go out there and we got to test it. We got to touch the stove and burn ourselves. And a lot of times they're spending more time and more money just to kind of find out what we were trying to tell them in the first place. But that's the learning process. And, sometimes you can't avoid that.
Yeah, we're seeing that here too. A combination, I think, of fewer leads, but also to your point, a much longer evaluation decision-making process. I think where we found like previously where projects would have been greenlit like relatively quickly, there's definitely now multiple stakeholders are getting involved, scrutinizing it, as you say, protracting it, going out, coming back. And it's only right, I guess, to have a higher emphasis on ROI, business justification, but it is certainly taking a lot longer to be able to do that and then win those new projects. That's what we're seeing over here.
Yeah, and it really feels like we've shifted more from a seller's to a buyer's market, right? And that's really affecting how pricing negotiations are playing out as well. I mean, I'm seeing it on a day-to-day basis. People are negotiating more confidently. Really, it's a race to the bottom. They want to get the best deal out there. And that is challenging. I mean, how are you adapting to that at Above the Fray, Noah?
Yeah, and I think the approach that you have to take when you own a business of any size is that this is what you started a business for, right? These times, you didn't start it because you're like, and if you didn't, then you there's a harsh reality coming in for you. But like, we're tasked with the job of adapting to these things and helping our customers and potential customers in the addressable market kind of navigate these things and making ourselves a better version of ourselves every day as a reaction to that. And so, I think one of the biggest things I've seen which I actually like, is finding easier foot in the door, lowering the barrier to entry, finding, a proof of concept, finding a smaller MVP. You take the traditional MVP and then you chop it by 20, and then you take one of those 20 and that's the new MVP. And so really helping the internal stakeholders at the organizations and companies, the merchants that we're working with, prove it out to the rest of their folks. Because you got to break down where this is coming from. And a lot of
Mm.
times, depending on the size of the business you're working with, everybody has pressures from their boss or their colleagues to, that's why they're pressing us for this ROI. That's why they can't just sign off on these larger, more expensive, time consuming projects. And so we have to cater to their needs and what they can do internally. So we help them prove their case out to the rest of their internal stakeholders. The challenge there is finding something that's not a loss leader for the agency, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a tendency to say, okay, well, we'll do this one. Well, it'll be a little bit of a loss leader, and then that'll open up into more business. But I think most of us are finding that it doesn't always, and we always knew that it doesn't always do that, but less than ever, just because of the uncertainty. So we need to make sure that we're still profitable while we're doing these proof of concepts, and that's a challenge. Obviously, sometimes it seems like a movable force against an irresistible object, or whatever that whole, there is definitely some inherent conflict there that we have to mitigate.
I definitely think flexibility in some of those commercial models is obviously really important. From the role that I play in the partnerships, I've definitely seen a lot more agencies offer things like starter packages. Certainly as a way to sort of lower that initial commitment barrier and then going on to expand that relationship once they've proven that initial value. Sandra, I guess in your role from Open Commerce, like what is it that you're seeing with agencies in terms of like effective sales strategies?
Yeah, I think the most successful agencies I'm working with have shifted more to a service-led approach, right? Much more consultative, much more outcome-based, much less, hey, here's a shopware shop. This is what we do for you. Good luck with that. Throw it over the fence and run with it, right? It's much more trying to add value by advising the customer, training them up, making sure they know how to leverage this new tool. They're leading conversations with business impact, right? Rather than with here's your deliverable, here's your Klaviyo integration. It's really focused on this is how you are gonna achieve your next quarter's KPIs. So, for example, instead of selling a website rebuild, they're selling a conversion rate improvement program, right? Something like that. And that's a very broad and vague term, but I think that just feels better to the client because they're buying something tangible instead of some, bytes and code and what have you that may or may not add value. And for us, we found especially also that partnerships are actually becoming a vital part of our new business driver. And I know, Katie, that is your forte. How should agents be thinking about platforms as solution partnerships in this market? Can you share any thoughts?
Many. But it's a great question. And I think that from my point of view, there's often a misconception that platform partnerships are primarily about referral leads, right? While referrals do happen, and they do, the real value, especially in tough market conditions that we're talking about now, I think comes from several other areas. So firstly, you've got partnerships that give you enhanced credibility. So being a certified partner of those major platforms will always instantly elevate your positioning in what could be competitive situations. You've also got partnerships that provide access to quite specialized knowledge and often resources that can help you to differentiate. So example would be you get access alpha beta to new features, often to roadmap that's coming out, direct support oftentimes from the platform's technical team. So that will give you an advantage. And with regards to marketing, you really don't want to underestimate the value of that. If you can do co-marketing opportunities, that can really help you to significantly enhance and expand your reach and your visibility. So certainly having and leveraging your partnerships can make a real difference.
Yeah, I love that you're calling that out, that it's not just a lead machine. It very much is about, co-marketing, putting in the work together. That's what we're finding as well. Like, there's no partner that's just throwing leads at us, right? It's hard work. It's showing your value, and then they kind of latch on to that and they start to introduce you. Noah, for you at Above the Fray, same story?
Yeah, when Katie, when you mentioned sort of the providing sort of the proof points or legitimizing. I think about, the world that we do online reviews and things like that. All of us, when we buy something or even when we're booking an Airbnb or whatever, we always want to look at the reviews, right? And so we don't want to take the person's word for it that we're buying from or whatever. And it's the same for us as an agency. Of course, we're going to say that we're the next best thing since sliced bread. But, if our partners can say that for us too, that's more of a proof positive. So that is a huge advantage of partnerships. I think there's three different, all of us know there's kind of the platform partners, there's technology providers, and there's, solutions integrators. And it's interesting too. I've also seen the solutions integrators come towards more of sort of a rising tide, which is encouraging because, oftentimes in tough times, it can be more of a crabs in a barrel mentality. At least there's a propensity to kind of shift towards that. And I think it's really important too, as kind of fellow agencies that are out there globally, we're all facing similar challenges. More often than not, our competition is not each other. It's inaction, it is indecision. It's just, we're losing out to somebody, not to a merchant that just decides not to do something versus a merchant that chooses one over the other. So things like this are helpful even to compare notes. But everything that you mentioned is spot on as far as leveraging the partnerships. You don't go there like, I think of was Dave Chappelle in the one movie where he's like, you got any more of those leads, like Phoenix, like that's kind of the old way of doing it. And I think that turns everybody off at this point.
Yeah.
We got to go out there, and understand how we can provide more shared value to our shared interests. We have to problem solve on how we can create these offerings that meet the evolving needs of the folks that are our clients and our customers. And sometimes that doesn't just happen with, one of us sitting by ourselves in a lab trying to brainstorm stuff. It happens when we get together in partnerships. And then specifically the selling motion itself, when we're going through pre-sales, platform partners that are leaning in, that are going with us on site to see a potential client, that are brainstorming how to do this and working on proposals together, crafting solutions together, getting creative when there's pushback and they say, we can't do this right now. Our budget just got cut for the rest of this year because our sales are down. I mean, it's a real life example that I had last year where we had somebody that was ready to sign on for a certain amount. And at the 11th hour just said, hey, there was a certain stakeholder here that at our company that said, we can't do this. Our sales are down and we don't want to spend our budget on this year. And it was actually a platform partner that helped me creatively come up with a solution to be able to get them in the door, to get a proof of concept going. It's now about to go live, and we're going to expand into evolution and ongoing growth of this particular client that could never have happened if we didn't kind of put our heads together and make it happen pre-sales.
No, I love that. And there is that bi-directionality if you can really work together to galvanize the client. And I think to that point, it is finding those partners that will then be your true advocates and that you can go to bat together, you're working in tandem. And I always try and advise agencies when I'm working with them to really curate their partnerships. Rather than having as many badges as possible, it can often water it down. I think it's much better to be really focused and have a few standout partnerships, 2, 3, then really have kind of surface level relationships that will count for a lot more. And to your kind of points that you've just made, you're really then going at it together and you've got a much chance of winning. And that if that process has worked once, you're going to then repeat it again. And I personally would always go for depth over breadth.
We've all done fantastic work. We've done incredible things together. It's not just bragging. It's not just marketing. It's actually providing value to other folks that could potentially work with us to get together and tell that story.
Yeah.
That's actually providing a value to, if I'm on the buying side, I'm confused as hell, right? I don't know what's out there. I don't know what's going to come. And so for somebody to say, hey, here's how it's happened before, show you the way that it's worked, not just promise you hopes and dreams, but show you what we've done together with these different partnerships, these different platforms and technologies, and even sometimes other agencies. And we have several different clients right now that there's multiple different SIs that are working together for the success of that. And if we can showcase that together with partnerships to potential folks, we're not just selling to them, we're providing them a really valuable service that will help their businesses out.
Completely.
Yeah, and I think on that note of partnerships and co-selling, I think we can also look at existing customers, right? What we have found is that when selling to existing customers, first of all, we tend to sell solutions that we kind of already know at Open Commerce, we seldom sell brand new solutions that we never tried because there's inherent risk at that. I hate to estimate that work, and we always go over. And then even better is if you can get that partner in and they do the co-selling, right? So we go to the client together, the existing client, and I can have identified a specific need. So recently I've worked on a fashion retailer. They were struggling with their purchase orders, right? They were using Excel basically to track the purchase orders. Of course, that was a hassle. So we ended up going with Inventory Planner, which is a great tool for inventory management, especially for the retail. I think they're very good at that. So I identified the need, and then Inventory Planner exactly knew how to pitch their solution in terms of here's how we handle seasonality. Have you thought about how to handle this replenishment rate? Or have you already addressed this issue in your company? Right? And that is the kind of knowledge that I will never be able to bring to bear, right, on this topic. All I needed to do was identify that challenge.
Yeah.
The partner came in to co-sell and actually provided so much value only through that first conversation and then through the onboarding phase that it made so much sense to bring a partner in instead of just trying to build it ourselves or find a random app to do that or extension to do that. So I think for me, partners are, especially with existing clients, super crucial. What are you seeing, Noah?
I mean, first of all, to co-sign on what you just said, Sander, that is one of your superpowers. I've worked with you now for over the years, I guess, a year or so. But I've noticed that, and that's something that I really have learned. I've always known the importance of. But none of us can be everything, and none of us want to be everything. We need to be focused and finite in where our expertise is and what we do. And as a digital consultancy, as you mentioned, we need, SI agencies need to be more consultative because that's how you show the results. That's how you show the roadmap and prove it out. But by the same token, we can't have expertise in every single pocket of this digital, universe that we live in. It's physical impossibility. I don't know. Maybe there's somebody out there, but that's where you bring it. You just have to know the right folks that can help solve that. It's an art. You almost need to be a conductor at a symphony to do this kind of thing, but it's how things get accomplished. I think the piece of the existing clients, the folks that you're working with, I mean, that has to be the North Star, the success of that. That's the whole reason. Otherwise, all the pre-sales work, all the pre-discovery stuff is just kind of hollow, right? I mean, that the whole reason that we're here is not even for our clients, but for their customers or the people that are hitting the buy button on their sites. So it's not even about them, it's about their customers. Or if they're, B2B, maybe it's not the buy button, but who's engaging with what we're building for them. So that doesn't happen overnight. There has to be a long-term focus. That's the only way it works. And I think that perspective provides value to everybody involved. And that's why it's okay to start off, with smaller proof of concepts. It's okay to, test the waters with different things. It's, as far as like smaller engagement. But in order to provide that long-term, that ROI that they're looking for and to be a true consultant, that's not something you can do when you build a website. It's not like, yeah, let me go buy that, like racetrack off the shelf for my 7-year-old, and then he's got that forever until it breaks. This is a living, breathing, organic thing that we're trying to do with the folks that we're working with. And so, the long-term relationships have to be in place. I've seen other relationships where we've worked with folks that have such a short-term focus, and I'm sure y'all have seen this too. And they're like, after month 1, after month 2, they're like, well, we haven't seen the demonstrated ROI. Where's my 10x return and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And you do all the expectation setting up front. And sometimes when there's tough times on the merchant side or the manufacturer side, they're just operating under human tendencies too, right? They're feeling anxiety and pressure. And it doesn't matter how much you've said, hey, this is going to take 3-6 months to start seeing this. Here's the milestones that we'll recheck. Here's the reports. So you're dealing with a lot of that anxiety on coming from all angles. And that's why just setting the expectations up front of the long-term relationship, but also breaking that down into digestible sort of short-term goals and milestones along the way is super critical to maintaining that.
But maybe to your point, though, because what you said really triggered me because yes, on the one hand, we're looking for a longer term relationship, right, from our merchants. But at the same time, for a lot of agencies, and Katie, you're going to love this one. For a lot of agencies, the definition of a long term relationship is you keep paying me every month to do updates and bug fixes, right? There's no value add for the merchant there, right? I'm literally just paying year in and year out for updates, and that's it. And for the patches that they're being rolled out. And I think that is why it's so specific to also broaden the offering that you have, right? Because at some point it gets a little bit boring to get another invoice for, the latest Shopware 6.7 update or some patch, which I mean is super important. But if that's all the value you can deliver, right? You're a one-trick pony, and guess what? Those tend to get rotated out with companies.
Mm-hmm. Completely. I mean, from my perspective, I think the way to kind of combat that is to really look to expand in ways that are going to leverage your existing expertise and client relationships rather than just trying to become that full service agency overnight. So, for example, if you're already building e-commerce sites for retailers, adding in conversion rate optimization, or in Europe, we're seeing a lot of additions of adding in like email marketing automation services. That's a really natural extension. It's quite an organic way to bring those services in, and they can oftentimes help some of those adjacent problems for those same client contacts. And I think it's also worth noting that expansion, it doesn't always need to be delivered entirely in-house. We are seeing a lot more agencies that are developing strategic partnerships with complementary service providers so they can maintain the client relationship, but also bringing in more of that specialized expertise. Noah, I'm curious about how you're handling like price increases with existing clients, especially, I guess, locality for you, and also given like inflation pressures that many agencies are facing. How are you tackling that?
You mean like price increases on their end for goods and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reality that kind of everybody's tackling at once. So that's, to set the context, it's not, and it's understood that it's not completely uncharted territory, but the fluctuation and the uncertainty is definitely at an unprecedented level right now. And I feel like there's a certain amount of, we're all in this together. We're working with other, entrepreneurs, business owners, business leaders, kind of everybody's swirling around the same toilet bowl. So there's a little bit of acknowledgement of that. So that helps. I think that, getting creative on how we can do things that aren't as costly for them up front so they can prove out that ROI internally, back to what we were saying earlier, is probably going to be one of the most important pieces of it. Also back to some of what Sander was mentioning prior to that, having, and you were too, Katie, having the diversification of offerings has helped us out as an agency because, but it's always a delicate balance, right? You can't, like to what I was saying earlier, you can't be everything to everybody. You can't be an expert in everything, but you also want to be able to, have eggs in multiple baskets, and not just for yourself as an organization, but for the folks that we work with. I'll just, because I know us, I can use ourselves as an anecdote, but when I wanted to build out a digital marketing team that does SEO and PPC and email marketing and things like that, and Aaron and my business partner, was like, slow your roll when we first started, almost a decade ago. Actually, it's our 8-year anniversary coming up here in a month. But I didn't get to have my digital marketing department until a few years ago. I really wanted it. And he's like, Noah, we kept banging me over the head with like, she's being the anchor, I'm being the sail, which is an important thing. But by the same token, having that now and having it being established for a while and bringing on some of the foremost experts to be able to do that provides another layer of value for our clients when bug fixes just isn't, sexy. It's like, hey, we'll help you brush your teeth in the morning. Okay, great. Thanks. That's kind of the maintenance stuff, right? It's the basic things. But they want to talk about how they, can, go on vacation or add an addition to their home that they can enjoy, a new sunroom that they can all have tea in, whatever. Like that, those are the things that are exciting. I mean, those are the things that are providing ROI for their business, that are helping it grow, evolve, or at a minimum, just helping it tread water as we get through this. Because a lot of businesses are in that place right now where they're like, all right, we need to batten down the hatches and wait this out. But they've been waiting it out for a long time. And they're finally like, oh gosh, what's going on up there on the earth? We have to get out of this, safe room that we've locked ourselves into. And so we can kind of help them kind of like poke their heads out, be that periscope that kind of looks around before they actually have to jump all the way out and see if it's still a toxic, nuclear wasteland or whatever. I don't mean to get too apocalyptic, but that is some of the approach that some folks are having in business right now. And so helping them sort of test the waters in different ways through some of these extra services. Again, you can't be everything to everybody. So a lot of times that also means even when you have a digital marketing department, we still can't do all the different aspects of it. So we have partnerships with folks that specialize in different areas, tools that do certain things that we can then leverage on our client's behalf. And all of those take time and investment in the relationship vetting. If we're bringing somebody to the table to our clients, we better be sure that, that they have a good track record. And usually the only way to have done that is to actually get some dirt under your fingernails together. And sometimes that means trial and error on our part, on the agencies. We don't always make the right choices in partnerships. And then we got to eat that and own that and evolve. So no real silver bullets, and you can't diversify everywhere. But I do think that having options both in-house and externally that you can bring to bear is where we're going to continue to provide value to the shared interests.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, it's been the same. We have implemented some price increases, but we have to be very mindful of also adding that extra value to the customer, right? Of course, we can explain a little bit with rising costs, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, but people are very mindful of that. So we try to really stress that we do deliver value. Some of the service that we done, where we used to do a 3-day discovery or like a full day discovery, we now try to do it in 2 days or half a day, right? Trying to tighten up some of the process we have internally. And I think in some relationships, you also just have to, grandfather them in on lower rates and just focus on that lifetime value, right? I much rather make a little less per hour, but then have a relationship for the next 2 or 3 years. I think that ultimately it saves on business development and all of that. So it's a delicate balance, as you said, Noah. We're coming up on time. Let's do a small rapid fire round before we close off, like some hot tips from both of you. Let's start with new business development. Katie.
I think a top consideration would be really for agencies to take a hard look at their differentiation. It's quite a crowded market. So I do think being known for something specific or some kind of specialization is becoming more and more crucial. Now, that could be a vertical that you're focused on. It could be a particular technology expertise, or even like a methodology that you use internally. But I think whatever that may be, or whatever you develop that to be, I think you need to make sure you're articulating that, why you're specifically the best choice for that, for whether that's for the client, for the problem, or even for the partner to really understand that. So for me, looking at your point of differentiation.
Yeah, I love that. And for maximizing value from existing clients, Noah?
Well, actually, I wanted to kind of go a little further down the funnel on what Katie was saying. You're kind of talking sort of like the awareness and the initial engagement and how you get out there. I think a tip that has been really useful for me that hopefully other agencies can, other folks, sellers and solutions strategists can use for new clients is, once you are in those conversations with them, just hone in on the biggest business problem that they have that they're identifying, and just look to solve that first when you're, and I know that sounds super basic and straightforward, and we've all said it, but more than ever, it's critical right now. And more than just honing in on that, but make sure that they understand that, help them see that, look, you're going to think there's 100 things you need to solve right now. This is the one that you've identified as the most important. Let's start with that and get them to agree to start with that. Because otherwise, they're going to want Rome built in a day, but they're not going to have the budget for that. It will never get, the analysis paralysis will go on forever. They'll never get the approval. So in order to get these sort of small MVPs, proof of concepts going, you got to not only identify that sort of number one business problem and just focus a solution on it, but you have to really get the buy-in from the client and all of their other colleagues and stakeholders there, that's what we're going to do first. Because if you don't have that, then they're going to say, yeah, this sounds great. Let's do this quick little intro, proof of concept, but they're going to expect the world. And then that long-term relationship will never happen because they're going to feel bait and switch. They're going to have different expectations. So I think, on that note, I think it was really important. I just wanted to mention
it's good.
that part of it because it's been useful for us. As far as existing clients, it is, the North Star is always putting yourselves in their shoes. I think if you continuously focus on how can we sell more and how can we provide more, yes, you have to do that. But the way to do that is to solve their problems and to ease their pain and to, really get to the bottom of what will help them evolve, stabilize and evolve. And to do that, doing annual business reviews, quarterly business reviews, even trimming those things down, to your point, Sander, the things that, used to be a 3-day engagement, make it a day, make it a half day. Don't do these week-long QBRs. They're great. A lot of value comes from that, but a lot of times it's just, we got to hone back in on it. So many of the things, the principles that we're talking about when it's a new potential relationship are the ones that we hold true when it's an existing relationship, and I think not losing sight of that. We've had plenty of merchants and clients that have come our way because they were working with agencies that have lost sight of that. And they appreciate the fact that we do strip this down to sort of brass tacks of what's important to them. And I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form to sort of brag or say that we don't screw things up, from time to time and here and there, but just as a helpful tidbit for other SIs in our space to kind of reflect on.
No, I like that. And I think to your point, whether it's a monthly review or a quarterly review, I think also going beyond the project updates, like we're talking about, like the broader services, their broader business goals and challenges, and things change. Things evolve and change quite regularly, and so keeping it also broad, like what else is happening, keeping abreast of those conversations, on a really regular way will often reveal new ways that you might be able to add value the client might not even necessarily think to ask for. So having regular conversations is a good one.
Yeah. Check in, just be human.
Yeah.
Talk to each other, right? Like, understand them on a level that's not just transactional every time. I mean, like really get to know them and have that ongoing dialogue. I think that's been really great for me. I'm not on the day-to-day with our clients, but I have periodic check-ins, and sometimes it's just not all about the day-to-day stuff, but it's about overarching larger things, what's going on with people's families and lives and jobs, and waxing poetic on some of these tough times that we're all facing. So on that note, I did want to give a quick shout out to something that gets overlooked, and it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And with these tough times, I mean, I've been noticing a lot more folks that are having more challenges, that are more stressed out, that are having maybe not full on breakdowns, but that these are real things. And as agency owners, as business owners, we need to be mindful of that and mindful of each other. And making sure that you can't provide value to anybody if you don't have yourself in order first. So I think it's important. We're instituting some stuff for our team for physical fitness and mental health over these next weeks and to come. And I think, doing it for ourselves as well, I think is hypercritical. And it kind of is sort of an elephant in the room when we're talking about the strategies and tactics and things like that we can help through tough times. But all of that is moot if we don't take care of ourselves. Okay. And so, get up a half hour earlier and just walk around the block if you normally just get up and get screen time right away, like whatever. Do something to do it, find online therapy if there's not one that's not a therapist near you or somebody that but it's back to the maintenance piece of it. It's brushing your teeth, but just kind of brushing your mind and soul and body. And it's super important. And that's what underlies all of this that we're talking.
I 100% agree. For me, my daily walk or going for a run is what literally keeps me sane at some time. So I think that's a good note to end on. We're coming up on the hour. We went a little bit over. We started a little bit late. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time for questions. I don't see anything in chat. If you do have questions, send them over in the Shopper United Slack. We'll make sure to get them answered in the general channel. We're all in there. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was valuable for people. We'd love to hear some of your tips and looking forward to the next event.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.